There's the sign that's over 100 years old. Not Little Big Duck, not Little Big Horn. Little Big Horn does exist. That's where Custer had his last stand. And he was here, fighting out at a place called East Cavalry Field on July 3rd. You can find it on your large map. A newly promoted brigadier general from captain at 23 years old, one of the so-called boy generals of the American Civil War. Wearing a black velveteen jacket with a red scarf around his neck. He said that aloud as meant to see him better. So could the enemy. Yeah. Now when we get to the intersection here, Clint is going to make a left, but you can see an equestrian statue, and this is the General Sedgwick, who will lead the 6th Corps here, 13,000 men, on a forced march of 35 miles in 18 hours without sleep. He'll be killed the following spring at Spotsylvania in Virginia, a moment after he tells his staff those Confederates couldn't hit an elephant at this distance. A single bullet, and Sedgwick is killed by a Confederate sharpshooter at a distance estimated at 800 yards. And he's now in the book, the 100 dumbest things that people have said. He should make the top 10. We're going to drive up the Wheatfield Road a little again, and we're going to take you on the U.S. Avenue so we can get a better view of that artillery round that went through the Trollsville barn. Up there in the distance to your left, sometimes called U.S. Regulars Hill. Some U.S. regulars here. They did have about 5% of the Union Army is U.S. regulars, and they will lead the next to last attack into the wheat fields. Extremely high casualties. Going crossover Plum Run again. Over here in the distance on your left, you can see the Rose wheat field from a slightly different view than we saw it before. What they do now is they grow grass in it, and they cut it like once a year, usually in the late fall, to prevent trees from growing in there. It's a 24-acre wheat field, ready for harvest. Harvest of death. 4,000 casualties in it. Not just one attack and repulse, a series of 6 or 7 hand-to-hand fighting. Also some of the only known bayonet deaths. This is the most common type of fence you see on your left, the Virginia wormwood or zigzag fence. They go up pretty easily because there's no nails used, and the diagonal posts are only etched a little bit into the ground. The straight fences, which are posts and rails, are the sturdier ones, although there aren't any right here to show you. The originals of those would have had their vertical posts sunk a foot or more in the ground. Notice also, as we're heading in this direction, which is west, notice how the ground continually gets higher and higher here, and that's what Sickles is looking at also. General Meade's sickles here probably sometime between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Meade says to Sickles, "I feel you've gone too far, General." Well, Sickles volunteers that he'll move his 3rd Corps back, but by this point in time, the Confederates start opening up with artillery, and Meade decides to reinforce Sickles rather than having him retreat under fire. The unit that he put together, Sickles, is the Excelsior Brigade. That's the mine that has the eagle on top. We're passing by 2 New Jersey monuments. This is Clark's battery. They fired 1,300 rounds. The bullet is the 7th New Jersey, and that's supposed to be where their colonel, Louis Francine, was mortally wounded. Some people believe there should have been a bronze bust of Sickles in between those 5 columns. It's possible, although we don't know for sure, that he absconded with the funds. Of course, by the time that happened, he was in his 90s and probably not all that, coherent. Yeah, it's mustard. I'm right up there. Yeah, this is mustard here. This would be United States Avenue. Yep, remember again, I've mentioned that avenues were built, so this was a road that was not here. Pikes, turnpikes, and roads were here on your map. Sickles' wounding monument, we couldn't see it earlier from the peach orchard because of the haze. But it's over here to the left of the barn. You'll eventually see it. That's supposedly where he was hit. You can see it's emerging now from one of the trees. This large tree on the right-hand side is a witness tree. It's a 235-year-old swamp oak. And as we get a little bit closer to the barn, I think you'll be able to see that hole quite easily. It's probably fired by a Confederate artillery battery well to our south. There it is right there. This is a property that I believe is lived in by a full-time ranger.
Oh my God.
Buildings are electrified, they're running water, they try and keep the outside looking like it did in 1863. By having somebody in the property, it cuts down on vandalism and maintenance. This is a part of a horse trail that you see over here to your right. This was put in maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. If you're walking on the horse trails, you better look down before you take each step. Some Mississippians, actually the 21st Mississippi, temporarily captured some of Watson's battery over there to your left before the 39th New York retakes them. There's a lot of that going on. There's many more artillery pieces captured here than we can really add up, because a lot of times they take credit for it. Different units do. Here's the George Weichert farm over here to your right, I should say. This has been used as a hospital, so as we pass it by, take a look out in those fields and imagine hundreds of men awaiting their turns on the amputation tables. The men furthest away, likely gut shot. Just a question of how long it would take before the man died of infection. Gut shot in the Civil War, you're basically a dead man. They didn't know infections were and they couldn't treat them. Now when Clint makes this left-hand turn here, you'll see a portrait statue a little bit further down the road, and that's the Father William Corby. It shows him giving absolution to the Irish Brigade before they go fight the wheat field. He'll later become president of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. When he dies in the late 1880s, his pallbearers are members of the Irish Brigade. People see them carrying his body and will say for the first time, there go the Fighting Irish, and the nickname will stick. This statue at Notre Dame is given the nickname of Fair Catch Corby, awaiting a punt that he's not going to return in an American football game. Well, you see artillery battery monuments. Keep in mind that typically Union artillery batteries would have had 6 pieces, not the couple that they're showing you here. So a lot more artillery then as opposed to now. And a better view now of the Pennsylvania Monument, going up in 1910 at a cost of a little bit under $250,000. At its very top, Nike, the winged goddess of victory. Below the dome, scenes of the battle carved in granite. The names up there are Pennsylvania generals at various levels of command, as are most of the statues. The man on the left with his arm outstretched you'll recognize as being Lincoln. The bronze plaques, almost all of those, represent Pennsylvania regiments that fought here, and the names of every man in the unit are on them, close to 34,000 names. So the woman who designs the Vietnam Wall in Washington, Maya Lin, will get the idea for that from the Pennsylvania Monument. Although at the wall, 58,000 plus dead. Here, living, wounded, or killed in a Pennsylvania regiment, your name is likely on the monument. Now a little bit of a summary leading up to July 3rd. First day's fighting, north and west of town. Remember we got out at the Peace Light when it was hardly raining at all. That becomes a Confederate victory. As they drive the 1st and 11th Corps back to Cemetery Hill, which is now that tree line you can see to your right in front. On the 2nd, Confederates are striking the ends or the flanks of a fish-shaped line that's almost 3 miles in length. They now control the Peach Orchard, the Devil's Den, and the lower slope of Culp's Hill on the far Union right. So that evening, both commanders have decisions to make. The Union Army will hold a council of war late that night at Meade's headquarters, and they'll decide to stay in position one more day, and if attacked by Confederates, who are mostly in that tree line to your left, accept battle. Lee will decide to strike the Union center. These trees that you see on your left are the ones that I tried to show you from the Virginia Monument, which become the aiming point of Pickett's charge on July 3rd. Confederates will begin the initiative, or the offensive, with an artillery barrage. Lee is using 160 cannon to try and strike this area left in front of us as hard as they could, to do 2 things. Knock out Union artillery. Many more pieces here than you see here today, and secondarily, kill or demoralize the main Union infantry line that you can see marked by that row of monuments. Confederate artillery is also going to have a couple of problems on July 3rd. One problem that they have is that a lot of the fuses on the exploding rounds are defective, And the estimate is that half or more of these become overshots. In fact, when they were in lamp preparation for the new visitor center, they found a lot of artillery fragments out there. The second problem, it's an absolutely still day. Artillery pieces on both sides are bellowing out huge volumes of black smoke. This is not the era of smokeless powder. The Confederates are also having difficulty seeing how much damage they're doing. But it's been going on for close to 2 hours. Longstreet's been put in command of the attack by Lee. He'll be told, if you don't send those men soon, we'll have no long-range ammunition left at all to support the advance. Standing nearby, George Pickett, leading one of the 3 divisions that makes the attack. Pickett extremely enthusiastic and optimistic, Longstreet quite pessimistic. If you recall earlier, I told you he was giving Lee options on July 2nd, which is a polite way of saying he didn't like Lee's plan. He doesn't like it on July 3rd either. He'll write in his memoirs that this was the most depressing day of his life, and that he had told Lee before the attack began that no 15,000 men arrayed for battle could take this position. Guess what? He's already been given orders to try and do so. So Pickett goes to Longstreet, asks him, General, shall we advance the men? Longstreet, unable to even use words to reply. He'll reluctantly nod his head up and down once or twice. Pickett takes that as a yes. And soon after, coming out of that tree line, I think you can see the Virginia mine, but that bus was at it just a moment, will come towards us, our modern-day estimate of 12,500 Confederates. Once they get out of the trees, better targets for long-range Union artillery fire. A couple of times they're going to get into those protected swales out there that I mentioned. They're hard to see from here, but they do exist. It's there that they'll redress the lines, fill in the gaps. Maybe wounded flag bearers passing flags to somebody else. Likely a lot of prayers being sent out there too. They won't start taking most of their casualties until they hit the Emmitsburg Road. And those that you see out there, those are the post and rail fences, with the originals of those having the vertical posts sunk a foot or more in the ground. Some had been knocked down in the second. Some still remained. They thought the weight of the advance would knock the rest of them over. Frequently that doesn't happen. So if they wanted to keep on coming, they had to climb them, which slows them down and starts making them now better targets for Union infantry, who will stand right out here along the stone wall and start firing at a virtually stationary Confederate target. Now, we're not certain how many Confederates make it across the Emmitsburg Road, but one thing we do know is that around this time, Union Army is sensing where the attack is cresting. And they're going to send out infantry both south and north of the Confederate line. So now what's going on here, watch this. I'm going to draw this in the air so it's going to disappear really quickly. The Confederates are now entering the open side of a 3-sided box. They're taking infantry fire from 3 directions. What's the artillery now firing at them? Something called canister. 27 of these iron balls, which are about the size of golf balls but close to 3 times heavier, going a distance of 400 yards at a muzzle velocity of 500 miles an hour. And sometimes they're firing double and triple canister in one blast. What this is essentially is an artilleryman's shotgun. There'll still be 2 temporary breakthroughs. The smaller of the 2, a little bit to the left of the clump of trees, 75 to 100 men break through there. We have accounts of hand-to-hand fighting going on within the trees. Probably not much longer than 5 minutes, because it very quickly happens. As unthreatened Union troops further south are rushed into that area, they surround those men, most have become prisoners. Largest breakthrough, we have an excellent view for this, is just off here to your left. Where that single tree now stands is the angle. Notice the stone wall creates a 90-degree angle about where that tree is. So between there and the monument of the 72nd Pennsylvania, that's the guy with the club musket that most of you, I think, can see. On the other side of the stone wall, 250 to 300 Confederates, afraid of going over the wall. What's their other choice? Head back almost a mile. But unless you surrender, maybe take a bullet in the back. These are the men who were led by Lewis Armstead, Pickett's last standing of 3 brigade commanders. Ironically, his uncle was in charge of Fort McHenry when it was fired on by the British during the War of 1812, and when our national anthem is written by Francis Scott Key. So to motivate those men, Armstead will take his sword, ram it through his hat, hold it above his head, and use words similar to these. Who will follow me? Give them the cold steel, meaning the bayonet. So in those words, they rush the wall. They head back here towards Cushing's battery. Here you see